I think self-awareness gets in the way where people might think, oh, I totally respect my teams. But then the way that they act and speak is contrary to that. If you're not sure if your team feels respected by you, ask them. And if you don't have the relationship to ask them, they probably don't feel respected by you.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey, friend, Erin here with another interview. And I just want to ask you, do you ever feel like every time you take that next leap in your career, whether you get promoted or you move to a new company into a higher level position, that there's a little bit of a mask, a facade, like some cover up you got to put on not because somebody told you you had to do that, because if you don't, people might figure out you're actually kind of a fraud. Well, of course, you're not a fraud, but you need to make sure that you look the part, that you seem like you are material, executive material, manager material. I mean, it's kind of like when I step on stage, like, yeah, I put on another layer of makeup. But what if that layer that you're putting on is the very thing that's going to make you fail? So our next guest is a communication expert. Her name is Rachel DeAlto, and she argues that that is exactly the same thing that is going to make you lose your team's respect and ultimately fail as a leader and get your job done. So in this episode, we break down this whole thing that she talks about what people crave most, and it's really relatability. And we also talk about how to use her simple me, you, we method to handle tough conversations. I mean, who doesn't need a little help and framework around having tough conversations? And then also what it takes to really build confidence after, sort of your ego has been running the show for a while. So if you've ever felt like that, you've ever felt a little bit like a fraud, a little bit like you're putting on a mask, a little bit like you have to be somebody different at each layer, then this is definitely the episode for you. So enjoy my conversation with Rachel DeAlto. I'm so excited to have you on. And I have to ask you first this question that I've never gotten the chance to ask you. Like, how the hell did you go from being a lawyer to being a relatability expert on a freaking reality dating show? Why did I miss the memo on
Oh my God. Yeah, it was completely unintentional. I was a lawyer, I came up with this idea for a startup company. And the idea was I was still going to run the company while being a lawyer. Like, I just didn't think about switching out of it. And then we raised like $2 million. And I was like, shit, I should probably focus on this. And so ended up going all in. And the company was around dating and relationships. Like, it was a dating company before dating companies existed. So this is like pre-Tinder. There was no apps. And so we had this great idea that came out about 3 months before all of the apps were launched. Like, had no idea, obviously, because it was, protected. And started doing TV around the company to try to salvage it and keep it alive. And they're like, we started working with a shark from Shark Tank who was like, you need to become the expert. And I'm like, dude, I'm a lawyer running a company. They made me become a flirting expert because it was really a way to flirt. And I was like, well, okay, we're going to follow this down. But that led to like a ton of TV. And then I realized that could be a career. And I'm like, this is awesome. They do my hair and makeup. So basically it was lashes. It was lashes that got me.
Lashes the key?
Lashes, yeah, was absolutely the reason why I ditched the law forever. And even my mom, this is like 2 days ago, she's like, you could always go back to law. And I'm like, what?
That is an accurate statement, Mother. That is an accurate statement. That does not mean I do it.
girl, I'm like, I'm good. I was like, it's been 16 years since I've had a real job, mom. I'm okay. But, it's that baby boomer mindset of like, you have a degree, you must
Yes.
use it. I was like, no, we're just going to pay for it until I die.
Wait, so slow down. Okay, number one tip in flirting, which I'm doing for our listeners because I've been married for 21 years and I know how to flirt. But number one tip for flirting back then, because this is obviously, pre everything being like the apps. And then now, why not? Like, what do you got? What do you got for us?
Oh my gosh. You know what's so funny? I don't even remember what I wrote in my book. Actually, this is even funnier. So I don't talk about all of the elements of this story all the time because it's just irrelevant to some things, but it's a fun story. And I was talking to our friend Shola Richard, phenomenal speaker, phenomenal human being. The dude buys like 2 copies of my book because I wrote a book on flirting. They're like, you have to write a book. I wrote this book in 10 days. It's awful. This is back in like 2010. And there's no AI. There's nothing to help me. And so it's just terrible. And so he starts sending me snippets from it. He's like, this is gold. I've got a picture that his wife took of him reading it to his kids on Christmas morning. It's the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. But I don't know. I'm like, what did I say? I think, obviously eye contact. There might be a smile. I think I had like 5 steps to super flirt. And for my husband's benefit, I should probably reread them. Apparently, I don't remember.
That's okay. So first of all, that makes me feel so much better because my memory sucks. And
oh my gosh,
you wrote a whole book on
girl, it's 15 years ago. Yeah, I was like, I don't know what I wrote. I think they're buried somewhere. I probably gave one to my mom who didn't want it.
Well, I love the lesson, right? Like, just go and do shit. And now you've written, is it 3 books total?
I don't even count the first one, but we can still count it. But technically, I did write it poorly. But I wrote 3. The other 2 are way better.
I feel like that's the best marketing you could ever do. Like, it's the worst book ever, and then everybody's like, okay, now I have to buy and see just
to see how bad it is. Yeah, I think it's solidly bad. There's illustrations. Just go color on it if you do purchase it. Don't actually read it.
I love it. Well, we're going to focus on this one, The Relatable Leader, the latest book. And, for our listeners, they're, always looking for not just theory, but hot tips and tricks to make work suck less and to make leadership suck less. And so, the first question I had was, there a time where this concept of like relatability, not just in dating, but in leadership, really proved out for you? And you're like, this, like, I acted differently and I've got something here.
Yeah, well, the whole idea of it, so kind of going back to you're talking about, like, how do you go from law to reality television? The idea of relatable was something that came from when I was on Married at First Sight. So I was one of the experts. I always say was not a participant. I married my husband after I met him. But so I was the expert, and then I left after 2 seasons, and I kept getting this message: why did you leave? You were such a relatable expert. And it confused me. I was like, why is this word? And it was the same word. I'm telling you, at one point, I think I had counted up to 1,200 messages, and half of them were using that same word. And so I wanted to understand, what does that mean? I'm a talking head on TV. I've never met any of these people. Why do they feel connected to me? And so that's really what brought up relatability, was this idea, because I'm thinking, my gosh, if they see this, well, how do we replicate it? And then I started talking to organizations about relatability in general, and then recognizing, well, wait a second, we could be the most relatable team, but if the leaders aren't showing up in that way, then we're missing the mark. And so that took a lot of reflection of, when I was running that startup company and how terrible I was at that time. I was very unrelatable. It was, completely run by ego and fear is kind of my leadership perspective. And it was just the evolution of my life where I was like, wow, this really is a different way to look at it. And so that's where Relatable Leader came about. Again, that was another unintentional thing I did in my career where I was like, I don't want to write another book, but this just came up where I feel like leaders need to understand that's probably the best thing that they could do is focus on, how am I connecting?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. When you talk about relatability, this is kind of a weird question, but I'm curious. Most people would say, yeah, I need to be relatable and I want my leaders to be relatable. But what's the arch nemesis What's the thing that's, sort of holding people back from that, you think, in leadership?
Well, they have the impression and they get stuck on the fact that they think that that means that they're being nice or that they have to be friends or, I don't think they see that there's a bit of a dichotomy between the two ideas. And relatability doesn't mean that you give up all your boundaries and all of a sudden you're besties with all of your team. It's not about that. You can still have a leadership role and maintain those boundaries, but show up in a way that people are like, oh, wow, my boss is a human being. Awesome. And they treat me like a human being, also equally awesome.
What are the steps? And, this obviously is a lot of connection with what I talk about, authenticity.
Sure.
So I'm totally bought in. But what if you're like, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to go in and start being more relatable, but we're all on cruise control. What's a hack or two that people can
Yeah. Well, obviously, everything you talk about is a huge part of it. We found I did my own research on this because I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for in a lot of the peer-reviewed studies. And so I did my own research study, and authenticity was top 3 for men. That's what they're looking for from their leadership. But it was really the surprising element that came out was that teams are looking for respect from their leader. Like that's how they feel like connected to their leadership, is when they feel respected by their leaders. And that part was really sad to me, and it's one of those things I have conversations with teams all the time. I had one yesterday, and they were telling me about just the way that their boss was talking to them and texting them and, just saying like, gosh, if I didn't have this middle manager here, I would be out because I wouldn't have that buffer. And I just feel so disrespected by these people. And I think it's a sad hack because it's so baseline, right? This is not go out there and be vulnerable. It's respect your people, treat them like they matter. And I always look at, when people are saying, when I did my study and when they came back and these were the types of things that they were asking for or saying, this makes a great leader, there's negativity bias, and we think of the things that we don't have. And that's where I was like, wow, that means that the majority of our teams don't feel like they have respect. They don't feel like they can trust their leadership. They don't feel like they're communicating well. And so that's probably a lot to undertake. You asked for one thing. But really, and I say this all the time, like, go out there and respect your teams, make them feel like they matter and their value is recognized. And you could stop there.
Do you think the respect angle is that they do respect them, they just don't show it, or they do things that erode it? And if that's the case, what are the sort of like the two ships passing in the night where leaders like, yeah, no, I respect them, and the team's like, no, they don't respect me? What do you think's getting in the way?
I think people are not aware sometimes of how they show up, of their tones, of their actions, of, their words. And so I think self-awareness gets in the way, where people might think, oh, I totally respect my teams. But then the way that they act and speak is contrary to that. And that's where I love a 360 assessment. If you're not sure if your team feels respected by you, ask them. And if you don't have the relationship to ask them, they probably don't feel respected by you.
Yeah, that's so true. And I probably a lot of it too is everybody's just running so fast. And so if they're running fast from an email or a meeting where they were disrespected, sometimes that stuff, I think that shit rolls downhill.
Totally.
You stop and try to say, okay, let me not have it run downhill.
Yeah.
One of the things you talk a lot about too is confidence, right? And, obviously you're a keynote speaker, storytime author, former, two-ish author, all of these things. And one could look at you and be like, okay, yeah, of course you have confidence. Where's a time where your confidence even shakes, and what do you do to get through it? Like, or are you just always like, have you found your way?
Heck no, dude, it is like imposter syndrome on a regular. I mean, in everything that you just talked about, there's been imposter syndrome along the way, like every single step of it, getting into speaking, starting a startup company. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going to, pretend. And that's why I joke around about how I was a horrible leader because I was based in ego and fear. And that's not confidence, and so every step, thankfully, I haven't moved back to ego and fear as I went into keynote speaking or writing. But it's always me trying to figure out, like, do I belong here? And the only way that I can find myself comfortable in saying yes is if I meet my own standards. It's not looking for external validation. You could have all of that, but it's like, do I feel good about the work I do? But
Mm.
I always, like, there is a learning curve for that. And I remember I went back and got a master's in psychology about 7 years ago. And I hadn't been in school. Last time I was in school was law school, which I graduated in like 2006. And so I was so out of it. And I was just so out of just the way that you think, obviously, when you're in school is just very different from everyday life. And I remember in like the first week of classes being like, I'm not going to be able to do this. And I just felt so overwhelmed. And I was like, I probably should quit now. Like, quit now. You have that devil on your shoulder, like, go home. Like, you can't do this. And then realizing, like, it's one step in front of the other, and eventually your brain starts to adjust. Thank God for that. But like proving to yourself, no, I'm capable of this. And that's really, I have those moments all the time, but then I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to show myself I'm capable?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So tell us more about that. What do I have to do to show myself that I'm capable? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, it depends on kind of what that is. As a speaker, it's like, well, get up and speak and see how that lands, and let's see if this works. And I laugh at myself. I did like 3 TEDx's before I started being paid to speak, because I'm like, well, I'm going to speak somewhere, and like that TEDx's weren't as crazy popular. This is probably back in 2011, I want to say. Yeah, they're terrible. So I'm like, well, still not capable, but trying. And then it was, once I felt comfortable, I remember when I became a professional speaker, I would be terrified of client calls, because I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to realize that I'm a fraud. I have nothing to say and I'm terrible at this. And I'd be so worried about getting on a call and talking about my work. And it was eventually, it's like, you have to keep doing it and keep putting yourself in these awkward positions and over prepare for them. And then eventually realize, oh no, like, we're locked in now. If somebody wants to talk to me in like 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, like, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah. How did that relatability aspect, did that start to come into it once you sort of had this epiphany that this word was attached to you? Has that been a Band-Aid, a crutch, a strategy as you get in these situations where you're less confident?
Oh my gosh, always. Because I do feel like at the end of the day, people want to work with people that they like. We hear that all the time, especially from a sales perspective. And even if I might not feel like I'm at a specific level, or there's an opportunity that just feels like, oh my gosh, this is a next level that I wasn't ready for, I'm going to be as relatable as possible, because I'll figure out how to get there. Like, I'll figure out what I need to do from a competence level to rise to that occasion. But right now, I'm going to try to just be as connected to you as possible.
How do you do that? Like, what are some of your things? Like, take the sales call. Like,
Yeah.
And anybody listening, whether it's a sales call, an interview, a
Sure.
meeting with a big exec, what's something you do that is sort of strategic?
Well, it's interesting because I can't do it here as much, but asking questions, really getting curious about someone else. The data shows time and time again, the person who speaks the longest in a conversation ranks at the highest, because they were being paid attention to. And so if you want people to like you, stop talking. Stop talking. Which would make for a really shitty podcast if we both just stopped talking.
Like, no, you.
Be like, no,
you
Erin,
go.
You tell me. You
No, you
tell
go.
me about you. Tell me about your last book. But if you're not in a podcast situation, but if you are in an interview situation, if you're interviewing for a job, ask questions about the company, ask questions about them. Tell me about your experience here. Tell me about what you love the most about this. Because people do want to share. We're waiting to talk all the time. And be dialed in. Be humble enough to realize that it's not always about you.
Yeah.
It's about them. And so how do you make them feel seen and heard?
Yeah. We see that all the time where people be like, I so connect with them. And it's like, yeah, because you were talking 90% of the time. And so what you said, you connect with inherently because it came out of your mouth, and we just helped you get there. And I think it takes us a long time to figure that out. We don't usually figure that out in our 20s and our 30s.
No, we're
Trying to
idiots.
prove ourselves. Yeah.
For a very long Apologies to any 20s and 30-year-olds out there.
No, but we're trying to fast track you. You and I weren't listening to podcasts and doing professional development. I'm sure
No,
like our
no.
listeners were. Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me. They get noticed more than me. They have better luck than me. They're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed? Like, I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book, like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and like literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It's my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and well, you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things. You talked about, being a data nerd in your book and the research you did, and I love it. And I love that you essentially said, in this research, I had 2 hypotheses and both were wrong.
Yeah.
Tell us more about like what you thought and what you found out, because that's always so interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, I thought I had a grasp on what teams were looking for. I really did. I thought I was like, oh no, I could list this stuff out. Like I thought, you ask people like, what are you looking for in a leader? And we would go a Brene Brown route. And that's really what I assumed. And it wasn't. It was that, what they were looking for was baseline. It was so much more foundational. And that was so scary to me. I looked at the list of what came through and I was like, who hurt you? Because
yeah.
Like from that
Where's the
negativity
trauma?
bias, like they're answering the question. They're not thinking around like sitting back and be like, oh my gosh, I had this most amazing boss and these were the qualities they had. No, they're like, this is who I got stuck with and I never want to do that again. And so it made me sad. And then I thought my other main hypothesis was that leaders wouldn't like they would not agree with the teams. I thought that they would have a completely different perspective of what teams are looking for or how they had to show up. And they didn't. They were kind of in the same space of saying the same things and believing that relatability was important. And yet they also admit they don't do it. And so they kind of just told on themselves and said, yeah, I know. And especially, specific to authenticity, which is everything you're about. But one of the questions we asked was, are leaders more authentic when showing their human side? And I think it was over 85% of both leaders and teams said yes. And then, but the other question, the follow-up question was, do you think we're following an outdated model lacking in humanity? And 77% of leaders were like, yeah. So like, dude, you just said it's important.
Right.
We're supposed to do this. We're like, no, not going to do it.
But no, because emails and meetings and crappy, right? Like we're just, in this, like, unfortunately, this river that the current, like, I think just sweeps us off and it's hard to swim against it.
Yeah, but if you don't, it's like you're going to end up in the bay, like you literally, that's why I fight back on the time thing all the time because people are always like, Rachel, I don't have time. I don't have time to to sit down. I don't have time to do this. And I'm like, it takes seconds to show that you're a human being.
Yep.
Seconds. It takes, you don't have to sit down with somebody for an hour. Have a 5-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Drop off a cup of coffee and ask how their kids are. Like, don't pretend like this is going to take you days. It's not.
Yeah. No, I agree. Totally agree. So I want to switch topics a little bit because this is a topic we can't get enough of anytime we do an episode on tough conversations. People always want sort of like, how do I have these tough conversations, whether it's an employee that's not performing well or it's a boss, where you need to push back or ask for raise or what have you, a negotiation. You have something called the me, you, we approach, which is so simple. Talk to us about that.
It's my favorite. I remind people of it all the time. Sometimes they don't want to hear it. Like, it's like if you have this conversation that you have to have, it's kind of masked empathy. So it's me is the self-awareness portion of it where it's how am I showing up? What are my emotions right now? Am I angry? Am I frustrated? Am I tired? Am I stressed? And just take that second to be self-aware of you. And then so that's me. And then you is, say it was you and I having this conversation. I'm like, well, what's Erin feeling? What is her experience? How is she showing up to the table? What is her perspective? Try to put myself in your shoes. And then the we is really, what's that North Star? Because if we don't have a direction that we want this to go in, if we don't have an intention for the conversation, we're going to end up back in that river, going towards the bay again and being swept away because you have to be going towards something. So what's that end goal? It doesn't mean that you're going to get there, but like, what's the we? Because if we don't have a we in the conversation of where we want to get to, then why have it?
Yeah. What's the time when you use this approach successfully? What did it look like?
Oh my gosh, all of the time. Like I use it in personal relationships, professional relationships. If I have, a difficult situation, or I'm trying to think of like the last time I remember like my husband so he's in construction sales. And so a lot of times, everybody's fighting. They fight so much I have to walk out of the room. For a former attorney who was a litigator, I'm so conflict avoidant. I'm like, you're stressing me out.
I'm not getting paid for this. Let's go.
Yeah, it gets me uncomfortable. But, there was an issue with a job. And I was like, babe, don't forget. It was like the me, you, we. And it was like, you're stressed out. You're pissed off. They're stressed out. But their goal is to get whatever it is done. It was like, what is the ideal result here? And it's something that navigates you along those lines. I've seen it with, especially you mentioned feedback, which is always a challenge with leadership is how do I give feedback without really hurting people or irritating them or making them disengage? And so the me, you, we is like, okay, what's my perception of their work? What's my perception? How do I feel about the way that they're working? And then put yourself in their shoes. Like, what are they going through right now? And then what's the end goal? Where do you want them to end up? What do you want shifting? Because then it'll change your conversation and the words that you choose.
Yeah. I love the simplicity and just the pause that it, focuses you on to like get rid of those emotions, but also see their approach as well. Me, you, we, I absolutely love it. Have you seen any companies as you think about being a better leader, being a more relatable leader, having more respect, all the things that we're talking about? Have you seen a best practice out there, whether it's a specific company or leader? What are they doing? How are they putting this into, into practice?
Well, it's funny. I talk about it a lot in my keynotes is Satya Nadella from Microsoft. And couldn't pick a bigger company, but, Satya took over in 2014 from Steve Ballmer, who's now, I think, the Clippers owner. And he was just this kind of like beating the chest, like yelling and very much like competitive oriented, which is great for a basketball team.
Yeah.
But wasn't doing well in the Microsoft, that earlier era, and they were falling behind and lacking in engagement. Satya came in and he was all about a growth mindset. And from the moment he sent that first email, I shared parts of his email, but he sent this like, I don't know, 4-page long email to everyone in the company when he took over. But it wasn't just talking about products or software. It was talking about, himself. And he shared, he's like, I'm 46. I've been married for 22 years. I've got 3 kids. He talks about how he's constantly learning. And so he is probably the best example of relatability and relatable leader that I can find. I mean, I am hard pressed to find somebody who's done as much as he has in that sector. And the cool thing is he's also a case study of it worked. You know, he's
Yeah.
been there for 10 years. They went from a $300 billion market cap to 3.8 trillion.
Yeah. Good.
Like
Good ROI.
that was like, anytime someone's like, we have relatability, do we really need it? Yeah, actually, it might be helpful.
Well, and when I think about that email, it's like that cannot be farmed out to your corporate comms person or your chief of staff. Like emails like that need to truly come from you. And hopefully, do you know, does he still write his own emails or personable emails?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know what the latest has been, but you could even see it in any of his interviews and recent interviews. It's just the way he shows up. And to me, that's kind of the perfect example of like relatability is a vibe. It is how you show up, and you're going to show up in that way. And, you know, whether you're interviewing someone about your company or you're talking to the company.
Yeah. And back to the confidence thing, I don't think you can show up that way without having confidence. I think the two are very related. I don't talk about that much with authenticity, but like that has been brought up before, and it's back of my mind. Like there is a certain confidence that comes from it, and people, not just inside, but people see it. Like, oh, they're not worried that my words aren't perfect, or, you know, my email isn't, you know, polished, or so I think the two, you know, if you can start to do that, maybe you have to have a little confidence to get there, but people will see confidence in you when you are a little messier, a little more exposed, a little more relatable.
Yeah. And I'm sure you see it too, where when people are at least confident enough to start to be authentic and there's a good response to it, then all of a sudden you get boosted up and you're like, oh, okay, this works. I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people all the time, I don't change them. I change their addiction. And so that addiction comes with testing and getting data and being like, oh, they actually smiled in a meeting, or they actually paid attention, or they actually wrote me back. Why don't I do more of that? Right. And so it's just about creating that addiction to a new way of operating. I have two more questions. One's a little bigger and one's a softball. One, we always ask people, can you tell us a buck that story? So this would be a story about a time where you bucked the norm, went against the grain, and good things happened.
God, I feel like that's my entire life. I mean, it goes back to leaving law and being like, no, let's just see how this works. And you know what's interesting about that is I have a hard time. Like, I'm not a boastful person. And so like anytime that I'm giving myself flowers, I'm like, oh, shut up. Like, nobody wants to hear this. But honestly, it's like one of those things. Listen, I'm not a resilient speaker. I'm not like I'm not a goal setting speaker. So I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm like, we started this company. I became a freaking flirting expert. Company failed miserably, like literally tanked because we became obsolete overnight in terms of technology. And then instead of being like, and this was over the course of about a year, instead of being like, I'm going to go back and be a lawyer, I was like, F that. Like, there's something here. Like, there's a path to be followed. I'm now a single parent. So I had 2 kids. I had left my husband for a variety of very valid reasons. So I'm a single mom of 2, and I'm like, no, I don't want a real job. Like, I'm going to figure this out.
Figure it out.
And then it got figured out. But yeah, that was a strange time when you look back. Like, if my kid did that, I'd be like, what are you doing? Go get your job back.
I always say, where is the podcast? Because my son, I have a freshman son, and his 8th grade year was a shit show. Like, just everything tanked, you know, grades, and it was a bunch of things. It was hormones, it was injuries, it was, I don't give a fuck about 8th grade. And I was like, where podcasts of all the mothers, or fathers too, but mothers would be more fun, of all those people that said, oh yeah, I was a terrible student, or I dropped out of high school, but now they have like the $1 billion company. I want the podcast of like how they were dealing with the emotions and the, you know, the turns in that moment. And, you know, I think it's, you know, similar to your, you know, your twists and turns. Like, you weren't doing the rational thing, maybe, but you're absolutely crushing it, and you're doing what you're meant to do. And for those people just listening, when I met Rachel, like, immediately I was in a room full of people I did not know, people she knew. She was so warm and welcoming. I was telling her before we recorded, she has this resting smile face. And so you practice what you preach and you're doing what you're meant to do. And I think that's the message for everybody on here. Like the twists too and the turns may suck, but if ultimately in the back of your mind, you're like, no, but this feels like something deep down inside, even if I'm screwing it up every turn along the way, I'm meant to do, I should do it. And so just a little glazing, as my 14-year-old would say, on you. He used the lingo. But you're doing what you're meant to do. And I think that's why we tell these stories, you can buck that and think good things could happen. So before I ask the final question, where can people follow you and get the book, Relatable Leader?
I am Rachel DeAlto everywhere, and the book is Amazon and all those other places. Everywhere books are sold.
Awesome. And people are going to be hunting for the first book too. What's the title?
Oh my God.
Make our Google search easy.
Flirt fearlessly. I love it. Alliteration.
Oh right? My gosh.
Big fan. Yep. I mean, I don't know if they're still printing them. It's been a minute. I tried to buy them. Yeah, I literally tried to buy out of my contract for that one because I worked with like a hybrid publisher and they're like, you have to buy like 2,000 more books. And I'm like, okay, never mind.
Never mind. It'll be out there. It'll be out there. Oh, that's so good.
It's a good story.
It's such a good story. And I love what Sheila did with it. That's so classic. Last tip. What's one last tip for our listeners to make work suck less?
Find the joy again. And I think that's through people. I really do. I think if you can find, I say this to my daughter too. So she's 15. We're in the throes of high school relationships of friends and it's terrifying and awful. I was like, find one person that like allows you to feel joy. Because there is somebody out there, and whether you work hybrid or fully remote or you're in office, like just find that one person that just makes it feel a little bit more fun.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know you've been a busy woman. It took us a while to get on here, but congrats on the second and a half book launch, Relatable Leader, which I read. Everybody, it's amazing. Take it to your boss and hand it to them, very passive aggressively, and him or her. And follow Rachel. She really is a light in this world. And I appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us, and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.